Hello, and welcome to the Notary Business Talk, the podcast dedicated to sharing ideas, strategies, and techniques to help grow your business and improve your life. And now, with more than 2 decades of notary business experience, your host, Abraham Zamora, the notary entrepreneur.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Notary Business Talk. My name is Abraham Zamora, and I am the notary entrepreneur. And in this episode, we are going to discuss how to conquer anxiety as a notary entrepreneur, because that's something we all experience. Ronnie and I, even 20 plus years, 10 years later, we're still experiencing some sort of uncertainty at times. So it's completely normal, but I think more than ever, we're seeing it come up more on like forums. I'm seeing it on Facebook groups. I know, Ronnie, you were mentioning that in your general mentorship, a lot of this started popping up as a concern that notaries were having. And so we're definitely going to discuss that. As usual, we have Ronnie Mickle on the show, who is the founder of NotaryStars.com and the co-owner of Unlimited Ink Notary, which is a nationwide signing service company. So as usual, let's welcome Ronnie to the show. Ronnie, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I love being here. I love doing this with you.
Yeah, it's fun. I love the interviewing part. I love digging deep and kind of, pulling stuff out of your head that sometimes I think you don't even realize are in there. And it's always fun. So, but I want to go over a few things when it comes to anxiety, and really 3 things. What is anxiety? And anxiety is sort of the way I understand it and the research that I've done, how it actually manifests as a notary business owner, and ultimately how we can overcome this anxiety that a lot of us actually feel. So I'll start off with what I think is the best definition I could find about anxiety. And then I want Ronnie and myself to kind of go over a little bit of how we've experienced anxiety in the past. I want to talk about how it manifests itself in the actual industry, and then we can talk about some solutions. But going forward with anxiety, so as far as I understand it, anxiety stems from emotions that exaggerate the risk of being a notary business owner. Another way of putting this is like an irrational fear, a fear that really doesn't make a whole lot of sense based on the facts of reality, right? And these feelings usually come from ideas that we hold in our mind that aren't necessarily true. So it's true that there are risks in being a business owner. It is true that there is risk in being a notary. Some of the areas that I think are legitimate areas to be concerned about, to think about, to put effort into making sure you're the best at in these things. But really where I think anxiety comes from are 4 different areas. One is the fear of failure, right? Particularly when you're new and you haven't really had the years of experience that someone like, say, Ronnie or I have had, where we've been through the cycles, the ups and downs, and sort of know what the potential outcome is going to be because we have the experience behind us. But newer notaries don't have that. And so this fear of failure becomes more of an intense emotion that ultimately leads to anxiety based on the context of their knowledge. I mean, they know only as much as they know. Other people could be telling them, yo, don't worry about it. But for them, they're not seeing a paycheck coming in every single month because there's no notary work. Let's just say, for example, there's definitely a risk of failure. And ultimately, Ronnie, wouldn't you agree that failure is absolutely possible in this industry as notaries? Not everybody, you would say, makes it. Isn't that true?
I have to say that is true. I don't want to tell anyone that they can't make it. There are factors, and I want to make sure that this is clear because I don't want someone to think that we're pumping that into the brain because I don't want anxiety to come. There are some factors that could make it harder for you to achieve success. If you are in a highly populated area or a pretty large city, you have a great probability, if you're willing to put in the work, to succeed. If you are in a more rural area where there are less properties and a lesser population, you may need to combine services or combine things that you can do in order to achieve success. And when I consider success, it means never working for anyone but myself again. That to me is success. That's all I need. I don't care how much money I have. I just need not to work for someone else. I don't mind working for clients. I don't mind working for other things, but it may depend upon area and those types of things. But I think the fear of failure comes sometimes more times irrationally from those who don't understand the power that they have to work on their own. I think, one of the first things to get rid of anxiety as a small business owner is to understand the power that you actually have of just saying, I'm going to take this first step.
Right. And that's not always very easy to do, because particularly for those who are new, they may not know what the next step is, and they may not know who to ask or who to talk to. I mean, there are so many people out there giving advice. I mean, when you and I started, it seemed like it was lonely, only just you and I. Now it's the opposite. There's just so much information on TikTok and YouTube that it's overload, right? And I think a feeling of being overwhelmed comes over notaries, and they don't know, they become paralyzed. And
it's really interesting that you say this, and I wish I had it with me today. I actually just watched a documentary about the age that we live in. Take notary out of the equation altogether. We are in information overload now. There is more information being published every second now on TikTok, 24 hours a day around the world, than ever before in all of human history. So much to the point that it actually affects how web pages are categorized and loaded. Google was actually on a backlog for the longest time because they weren't expecting such an influx. It started during COVID, which kind of like we had a lot of notaries come into the industry.
Right.
A lot of information, a lot of people started working from home, blogging, doing things, all of these things being shoved into TikTok. A new social media platform arose. Now we have even more information going onto the internet, and it actually did cause a backlog of information. So if Google, one of the biggest resources we have for information, goes on backlog, I mean, think what it's doing to our brains, and information overload is actually a thing. So I'm glad that you brought that up. And I would like for your listeners to actually just go out and do a Google search on information overload and how it affects the human mind and human psyche and the human heart and the feeling that you walk through your day with.
Yeah, it definitely can become overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
The other area that I think is a realistic risk, although I think, and this is where the anxiety comes from, I think notaries and people in our industry kind of blow it out of proportion. This is the irrational emotion, right? Or it becomes a bigger issue of what they really think it is, although it really is an issue or something to be concerned about. And that's the area of financial pressure, right? Even if you're making money, but specifically, especially when you're not making a whole lot of money, this idea of being self-employed, especially if you come from being an employee, right? And you jump into notary, this idea of uncertainty, this idea of, I didn't get as many orders, as many signings, as many notary jobs this month than I did in the last 3 months. Oh my gosh, that's it. It's over. This is how it's going to be for the rest of my career. And then this is where the anxiety settles in. Although a legitimate issue, and there's ways of preparing, and we'll talk about how we can prepare to alleviate future anxiety. But that's definitely an area where I think anxiety comes from financial pressures. Wouldn't you agree, Ronnie?
I think so. And, I want to say that anxiety starts before you start, actually, for a lot of people. I see so many people that are sitting in their day jobs right now, afraid to leave their day jobs and even stick a toe in the water on something that they're truly interested in. I guarantee you right now, there's someone listening to this replay of this podcast or is going to watch it on YouTube, and they're going to say, oh, they're talking about me. Because they're sitting at their job and they're really interested in this. They're trying to learn bits and pieces as they go. And the anxiety of taking that first step of saying, I'm going to do it part-time, or I'm just going to quit my job and go, is keeping them. And then when you get into the actual career, and it's not just financial pressure, that is where it starts for a lot of people, because, finances are a huge part of anxiety for a lot of small business owners. But the anxiety stems to me from, when I started being a notary, I was single and I was in my 20s, late 20s. I'm in my mid 40s now. And for me, I didn't have, I was lucky in a sense. I mean, I don't want to go down too far of a road. I mean, anybody that's at Notary Stars knows, and I love my parents, but my parents were very different. They didn't care if I went to college. They didn't care if I opened a business. All they cared about was I was a good person and I knew how to balance a checkbook and that I didn't rob a bank and, I didn't beat my dog. Those were the biggest aspirations that they had for me. And to this day, I own a multi-million-dollar company and I go home and they don't care what kind of shoes I'm wearing. They don't care if my hair is combed. They don't care if I gained 10 pounds. They just love me. And so in a lot of ways, that was really freeing, because in my 20s, when I started doing this, I was living in the center of Los Angeles and the pressure actually came from me. But I can only imagine if I were in a relationship at the time of starting a business. I got into a relationship after starting a business. But if you're married or you're in a long-term relationship, you have someone else to kind of answer to, and you are usually splitting the cost of life itself with someone else. And that is a huge pressure to take upon yourself. So that anxiety gets multiplied unless you have the right support system around you.
Right. Yeah. Or kids. If you have kids, I mean, give me a break.
And you can't even talk about it with kids. Most people won't even discuss finances with their kids unless they're, 16, 17, 18, and then you start having to prepare them for the real world. But how do you talk about this with a 5-year-old and you say, mommy or daddy might not be able to get you, the food you like this week, we're going to be shopping generic.
Yeah.
It's kind of a hard conversation to have with kids, and a lot of parents won't have that conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I hear it all the time, especially brand new notaries who are just afraid to take that first order. I mean, I have people reach out to me all the time, either through Instagram or they'll email me. By the way, if you want to email me questions and you want me to reach out to you and have a conversation, you can email me at contact@Notary Business Stars, notaries. I'm so used to notarybusinesstalk.com. And I'll definitely get back to you if I can within a few days. But I hear people come out, all the time. Hey, how do I just take that first step, take that first sign? And oftentimes it's just overcoming that fear. But the next pressure that I noticed that really affects notaries to the point where it becomes anxiety is quite the opposite, right? The workload demands. It's not when it gets really busy, not knowing when to say no, when to not take the order, which leads to overbooking yourself, being late, and oftentimes the fear, the irrational idea that leads to the exaggerated belief is, if I don't say yes to these companies, they're not going to use me anymore. They're going to find somebody else. I mean, this can go in so many directions, most of the time, which, based on ideas that aren't based on truth. I mean, that's not really the truth. So what do you think about the idea of anxiety on the opposite end, where people are just trying to take too much or more than they can actually handle and they become overwhelmed?
I have experienced this personally twice in my life. When I was putting myself through college back in Atlanta, before I left and moved to Los Angeles, I was worked at a bar and it was open 7 days a week. Back then, Atlanta was a 24-hour city for certain bars. My particular bar was open from 4 p.m. till 4 a.m. And they overhired for the bar because it was just slam busy. We basically just could come to work and tell them when we wanted to work and when we didn't. We had to be there, the hot nights like Friday, Saturday, Sunday, but during the week, they didn't really care. But I was so afraid I was making great money. I was so afraid to say I wanted a day off, and I would always work an 8-hour shift and sometimes take up other people's shifts. And then I remember the first time I asked for time off and my boss just laughed at me and he was like, I think it's been like 3 years and you've never asked for a day off. You think we're going to say no? And I was like, okay, I got it. And he was like, you really don't have to work as much as you do. You do a good job. Flash forward into, I moved to Los Angeles, finished my degrees, go through life for a few more years. And when I first started with the notary business, I did the same thing. I got to where, and if you take training at Notary Stars, you'll hear me say, I used to come home and I would be sick. I would work so much.
Yeah.
And I would make mistakes early on in my career. my brain wasn't ready to process that many transactions a day. People often, and back then, just like I do, when this first all started, there weren't as many notaries. So there weren't ways for them to parse them out to more notaries. If you were a good notary and you serviced Los Angeles, you didn't service Los Angeles, you serviced all of LA, from the beach to downtown to North Hollywood. I mean, you were all over the place. And that just doesn't happen anymore. I mean, there's too many and they can get one closer. But I didn't know how to say no in the very beginning, up until probably about 7 years ago. And, I've been very candid about this. I don't care if people think I'm weird when I say this, but at some point in the past, I actually overbooked myself so much that I wound up attempting suicide.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel it, like I never felt it, like I was in a dark place. But as I healed from that experience, literally, I found myself understanding that I didn't take care of me first. And it was the pressure at the time. I was getting into a relationship. I was going to get married. I was in a lot of pain because, some people know that I was ran over by a car years ago as a mobile notary. And I was dealing with, still getting my body in check. I'm doing great these days. But I was also at the time going through building a business. And that was just so much pressure. But I didn't know how to identify it as anxiety or pressure until it went too far. And so I'm glad that you mentioned that as well, because you can have the opposite of anxiety. You can just keep pumping yourself until there's nothing left to pump, or until it causes you to make a mistake or a big mistake like I did.
Yeah.
So it works both ways.
Yeah. And I want to throw that out there because I know your story personally, and I knew you had some insights on that. And then the last area where I think anxiety creeps its little, vicious little head is it just being isolated as a notary, or having a lack of support. I mean, when we work in an office, we have coworkers and we have other people that we can make friends with and talk with. But this, I mean, especially when we started, but now it's not as bad. I think there's other groups that you can belong to and chit chat with people. But it's been said that the notary signing industry, or just being a notary in general, is a very isolated, lonely business that lacks the kind of support that people sometimes need to feel emotionally healthy. And I think this is one of the dangerous ones, because it leads to a subtle anxiety that builds up over time without you realizing, man, I would like some feedback, some human, interaction in the world that we live in the business that I'm in. I mean, what do you think of that, Ronnie?
I think that also has kind of two avenues to look at. So when you're actually running your business, whether you're working with a signing agency or a title company, you're generally outside of their office, and you are sent an order. So you get in your car, you prepare your file, you go to the signer's home, you do interact with them, but there's no personal interaction because you have to be so professional because you don't know these signers. Then you leave that appointment, you're in your car by yourself. So that's the isolating lone wolf. When it comes to marketing, unless you're taking a marketing course, no other notary is going to share their marketing tips with you unless they're far away from you, because as you move closer to making friends with other notaries, sometimes, and we have been encouraging that all year, to bring groups together, because you should be turning competitors into colleagues.
Sure.
And actually sharing resources. We've talked about that before, but a lot of notaries do create the facade of, no, I don't want another notary in my life. And to top it all off, to this day, I don't think anybody in my family truly understands what I do. I mean, I can't show them. It's not like I can bring them to my office and be like, this is my notary journal. Look at all the entries. I can't take them to, signing with me. I can't show them. I mean, they can see what I do on Notary Stars as far as teaching, and now they're starting to kind of get it. But back then, like, people were just like, what do you do? And how do you explain it? I mean, you can tell them, but it's not like, like my dad worked at Duracell my entire life, and he could take me, to his job once a year, and they had a fair, and my mom worked at department stores and things like that. I could walk in and see what she did for a living. You can't really do that with a notary. So it's sometimes the isolating factor is it's really hard to share what you do. And have people understand.
Yeah. And I think that's part of why I created this show, this podcast. I think it's something that, and I get the feedback, I get people feeling inspired by what we say. And the reason I focused on the podcast as opposed to, say, YouTube videos and stuff is because I know people are driving around and they listen to the show. They listen to the entirety of the show. So hopefully that helps a lot of people out there who listen to this.
I just want to say, it's probably once a week, if not twice a week.
Yeah.
Okay, we process about 3,000 transactions a month. I know a lot of notaries that would probably like to have more conversation, but at least once a week, someone calls me almost on the verge of tears, and sometimes in tears.
Yeah.
And our heart always sinks for them, where they say, I don't think I'm going to make it. I don't know if I'm cut out for this.
Yep.
And for anybody listening, if you're listening to this, you're trying to better yourself. You're trying to find your way. And I just want to let anybody that's listening know you are cut out for it. You are finding your way. If you have spent this much time, I mean, we are 30 minutes into a podcast right now. If you made it to this moment listening about this, it's resonating with you. And then that means that but you're not alone. No. It's just that, you mentioned something earlier, and I know I go off on tangents, but we also live in this age of social media, right? Where we're watching other notaries on TikTok who are having an amazing day, and they look great in their fabulous outfits, and their life sounds so wonderful when they're standing outside their fake TikTok title office that is not even real, talking about how much money they made, just so they can sell you something else in the video. We live in that age where you start to kind of believe the unreality of this. And the NNA actually did a real study on how many notaries actually make six figures. And I don't remember the number right now, but it was significantly low.
Yeah, it's like 8 to 10%, I think.
It's really low out of 450,000 notaries in the country. Really low number compared. And out of those 450,000, only about 80,000 of those are actually loan signing agents. So just so you know, the notaries above 80,000, they're not making six figures. Those are working at banks. They are just part of the NNA because they are a notary. They may be doing general notary work, but you're not making six figures off of that kind of work. It's definitely going to have some, heavy lifting, high paying ticket items in there. But people are looking at social media because there are a handful, even out of that 80,000, a handful of notaries who go on social media and really grind it in, which takes away a lot of people's self-worth. When they're finding their way, they think, I want to be that person. I'm not as good as that person, but that's not true. You just haven't found your greatness yet. Right. And so I think it's important to note that too, that social media can play a factor in your well-being. I actually don't look at social media. I know people see me on social media a lot, but that's not me. It's actually a hired team. When I post, it's very rare, and it's usually the stupidest thing that we post. I posted something recently on Instagram, and Gloria was like, "You're not really good at this." I am good, but I come up with cheesy little things that I want to post, and because I don't really care about. And I made a post recently on Instagram, and I realized I don't show my face on Instagram like a lot of companies do, because Notary Stars for me is not about how I feel and what I want other people to feel. It's an informational exchange for me. So I want people to be aware that also what they're allowing into their eyes and their ears affects how they feel as well, because it can add pressures that don't need to be there. Right. So I again, it's a tangent, but I feel it's important to add to the conversation.
I'm so, and I'm glad you said that, because I think what ends up happening is it creates this false expectation, right? It becomes this, and I think you're right. I'm sure there are a few of those notaries who are claiming that they make, six figures every month, every year, and they usually have a course behind them that they're trying to shove down your throat. And I doubt most of those are actually making that kind of money, but it creates this sort of expectation, especially for newer notaries, that that's the goal. That's what they should fight for. That's what they should. And I just had a guy, his name was JC. He's from Texas. He reached out to me and we started talking on Messenger on Facebook. And then I said, you know what, let's hop on a Zoom call. I talked to him for like an hour. The guy's brand new. He started 4 months ago. The guy's hungry. And he, and he's telling me, Abraham, if I can just make $500, $1,000 a month, like that's huge for me, right? That'll change I can take my family for dinner every month, where right now I can't do that. Yet we're trying to sell people, hey, make $5,000 a month when they haven't even made $500 a month. And so I think expectations are unrealistic. I think they're trying to sell it more than it's actually true. I'm glad you're saying that. So for those of you who are like wondering, why am I not making $5,000, $8,000 a month, and everybody else in this industry is, the truth is most of them are not. Don't hold yourself to that standard. We'll talk about what you can do to improve that. But I think Ronnie is absolutely correct. That is not what you want to focus on. That is not reality as it is. What we're going to talk about right now is, go ahead, Ronnie, you want to say something?
I can't wait to talk about what we do to fight anxiety. But before we go into that, I just want to mention, I wrote down some of the most common things that I hear on these notary support calls.
Yeah.
The number one thing is they ask me, do you think I'll make it?
Yeah.
And, I was actually called out by some crappy notary once because they asked me, do you think I'll make it? And they misconstrued what I said. And my answer is always, that's up to you. And there were 100 other notaries when I made that response. But of course, that was drugged down the pipeline and drug into something that I didn't say. It's up to you if you'll make it. I can't be the determining factor, and I'm not going to be someone who says, yes, you're going to make it. If you want to make it, then you are going to make it. Okay. Right. I'm a big believer in the Jungle Book at Disney, and just the bare necessities of life. Whatever you need, it will appear as long as you put one foot in front of the other. But the next question is, what if I don't succeed? I had that was a big one for me. What if I don't succeed? I had someone tell me you need to have 6 months savings. I didn't. I just went for it and clawed my way. But what if I don't succeed? Well, now we live in a world, and most people can DoorDash, Lyft, Uber, Amazon Flex. You've got a backup plan, okay, that literally only takes 24 hours to sign up for, and get signed up for them. So I'm a little tired of that question. Like, what if I don't succeed? You got to fail safe, okay? Some people say, I don't think I'm cut out for this. It's because they get too nervous before. People say, I don't feel like I'm enough. No one seems to understand what I'm doing here. And they mean that in a lot of arenas, like other notaries don't seem to know why I'm here. Title and escrow don't seem to know why I'm here because they don't have their confidence level up or their family. And then the biggest one, I think, is I'm afraid I'm going to let my family down. Those are the ones that I hear the most. And I started keeping a log of them. And I actually have kind of a reminder journal of things that I talked about with notaries so that I can use those to help other notaries. And I save some of my emails sometimes to kind of refer to them so I can remember what I told someone, because I'm trying to find the perfect answer. I don't know if I ever will, but I'm trying to find that perfect answer to get someone out of that. But until we find that perfect answer, let's talk about some of the things that we do to pull ourselves out of a funk or get out of being scared.
Yeah. So I think the first thing is we need to define what success looks like to us. And it doesn't have to be what we see, like you were saying, on social media. It could be the $500 a month, like JC was talking about. That might be enough to pay for that vacation, twice a year. So what is success? And in terms of the answering the question, will I make it? I believe there is a systematic, step-by-step way to identify whether you will or you will not make it. And I'm going to discuss this. And then this might be the answer you were thinking of, Ronnie, when you spoke earlier about the sort of the way to overcome this anxiety, particularly of this fear of, will I make it, right? So I have 5 steps that I've spent all day today preparing for this podcast, thinking, what can I actually give people aside from this this feel good affirmation crap. I mean, fine. You can tell yourself you're great all day. That's not going to make you make more money and increase your business if you're just telling yourself that all day. There's actually has to be a tangible, specific way of doing this. And here's what I've discovered from my research. So number one, you need to evaluate your skills honestly. Most of you don't realize how good you are, I think, or don't take the time to really sit down and appreciate the value, the skills, the attributes, the characteristics you have that make you great. You may have come from sales. You may have, maybe you were in an industry where customer service was, so, I mean, maybe you're great at remembering people's names. I mean, there's so many things that are great about you that can translate into helping you grow and improve your notary business. And I think the first step is to identify your strengths. Identify what skills you have that will help you in business. That's step one. And I want you to, if you want to speak to that, Ronnie, go ahead. But I have 5 things that I want to talk about here, and we can discuss them.
Just a little funny thing here. One of the things I hear all the time is that I don't want to go back to corporate America, or I think I'm going to have to get a job again. Well, yeah. If you think you're going to get hired and you don't want to go back, I hear a lot of people who left their job, they were there for 10, 15, 20 years, which means they can hold a job, right? So they had skills that people wanted.
Right.
And they were being paid for those skills. But yet they fear going back to that job. And I just think, like, if you fear going back to a job that wouldn't let you go and you left it, why can't you assess as a business owner why you hired yourself? Because you hire yourself as a business owner, you write your paycheck. And so you need to take that assessment and be like, okay, I'm hired, and now I just have to earn the money. Stop looking at you're not good enough, for this position,
right?
And thinking I'm gonna have to go get another job where somebody else can evaluate me. I'm not doing that to myself. Sorry.
Yeah.
Maybe I've been in it too long, but I will never work for a job for anyone else again. It is too freeing to own your own business.
Yeah, and for everyone that's listening, let me just tell you right now, there's a reason why you made a decision to become a notary, to start this business. You've come this far. You got your license, you got insured, you got your equipment. There's a reason why you decided to do that. And let me just say something else. It's very rare for an individual to have the courage to do what you've done, to leave a job, the safe secureness of a job, benefits, and take a leap of faith in themselves to go into business. The entrepreneur mindset, the thing that drives the world, is not something that most people have, yet you do.
Mm-hmm.
And right now you're not giving yourself enough credit. So I need you to go back and think, what made you do this? What caused you to have enough courage to say, I'm going to do this, whether you've quit your job or you're thinking about it, or you've already gone full time as a notary and you're stressed out about what's going on in the market. What is it? And I mean, what are some attributes that you think make a great notary? I think honesty is one of them, a great customer service, your responsiveness, right? I mean, what other attributes do you think people might start thinking about and asking themselves, do I have these? What do you think, Ronnie?
I think when you're asking yourself those questions, the last thing on the list should be, I thought I was going to make more money. Because, again, I don't want to say everyone's going to make great deal, but those who apply themselves in this industry and give it just a little time and a little effort go a really long way. So I think monetary should be the last on the list. If you perfect your craft as a notary, you will never be without a job.
Yeah.
It's just, it's just not going to happen.
And that leads to the second point, which is analyzing the market facts. And I'm talking about reality. What is the reality of the market? What is actually happening? Not what do you think is happening? What do you think is going to happen? But what is actually happening? So, for example, right now, we know it's a bit slow because the rates are high. that's a fact of the market. That's the reality of things. When the rates go down, the reality is that based on past experiences, it's probably going to get busy again. But you need to understand where we're at. Is it true? So here are some facts of reality, right? Is it true that there are more notaries now than there were before COVID? What do you think, Ronnie?
That is a fact that there are more notaries now than there were before COVID.
Yeah.
It's a simple fact. Now, are all of those notaries full-time? It is a fact that they are not.
Absolutely. Right.
Some of them are only working on weekends. Some of them are taking the files that you don't want to take.
Right.
Some of them are going great distances for lower file fees, and some of them are not going to be confident enough to walk in and get direct business. Whatever you want in this industry, there's enough of. And I have to tell you, I want to find the right analogy for this, but people need notaries, and you don't just make your money off of title and escrow in this industry. I was just telling Travis, so we brought on a big client, and we kind of had this one client come through that needed a bunch of work done, and right before, and then they kind of just slowed down, and the new client came in. That's business. We've had clients come in before where they spent, great deals of money, and then it's not that they left us, it's just that we finished the project with them. We've had instances where people needed thousands of things done by notaries, and we filled the room with 10 or 12 notaries, and they just notarized all day long. And those were great appointments. And then it would be strange, we would make all this money from that, and then our clients would be slow that month. You can't base your future all on monetary. It just can't be.
Right. Yeah, and I think being honest about the facts of the reality and analyzing the market is that you'll see the good and the bad of what's going on. And this is where I think a lot of notaries will start to panic, because the big fish right now, if we were using a fishing analogy, the big fish for notaries is loan signings. I mean, that's what everyone's going after, right? And if I was to think, and this analogy, I don't know why it keeps popping up in my head, but imagine, I don't know if you fish or not, Ronnie, I don't fish, but imagine you're going to go fishing and there's this big pond, right? And most people are fishing for loan signings. So they all get on their boats and they go to the middle of the lake, and they're all trying to fight each other. And that's where 80% of the fishermen are trying to catch this fish, loan signings. And in my mind, I imagine they're making such a ruckus that they start scaring the fish off, and a lot of the fish kind of go to the edges of the lake. The rest of us might see that and say, okay, it's a little too crowded, possibly, in the middle of the lake. Let me go outside of the mayhem and find other creative ways of catching these fish.
Oh, Abraham, I'm so glad that you're mentioning this, because this just brings me to a point. For anybody listening, I really want them to go to YouTube and look for a video called Notary on the Street.
Okay.
It is a new concept of how to market your notary business. We just did an expose with Marcy Tiberio from the New York Notary Alliance, who started the Notary on the Street. It's exactly what you're talking about in this analogy. So keep going, because that's a perfect example.
Yeah. Thank you for, by the way, that, and this is why we do the show, right? We want you guys to get informed. We want to help you out as best as we can. You're taking the time to listen to this, and we're making the time to provide this. And I think we're each trading value in that sense. But if we can be honest about the lake, and in this case, the market is the lake, then we can say, all right, look, there are opportunities outside of the lake where none of the fishermen are crowded. And let me fish there. And now you're catching fish enough to take home, enough to feed your family, because you're focused on reality. So, and these are now we're talking about the steps that are going to help you overcome anxiety. A lot of the notaries who have the anxiety is because they're not taking the time to, one, figure out what they're good at and what their strengths are and how they can leverage those. Two, they're not taking the time to analyze the facts of the market. And as a result, they're not able to see the opportunities of where you can catch more fish.
Yeah.
And that's how I see that. Okay. once you've identified the facts of reality, then the third thing is to trust your mind and trust that what you just verified and what you've analyzed is true and correct. This way, you can start asking yourself, well, what else can I do to make money, to be successful? It creates a completely different dynamic in your brain and your mind to start seeking opportunities instead of whining and complaining of why the new notaries are taking your job and you're not making $200 a signing like you were 10 years ago. Get over it, people. You know, I mean, give me a break, right? So the fourth one is then judge yourself independently. Take everything you've just gathered, your strengths, facts of reality of the market, the fact that you've done the job properly to analyze this, and now judge yourself. Okay, based on what I know, based on the qualities that I have and the opportunities that I see, and can I truly be successful in, say, going after general notary work, or maybe doing fingerprinting, or doing, you know, maybe just specializing in going after jail notaries or hospital notaries. I mean, there's so many specific ways where you can generate $500, $1,000, $2,000 if you focus on a specific niche that no one else is looking at, because they're all chasing the loan signings. That would be which is evaluate or judge yourself independently. And then the final step is to take purposeful action. Once you've identified, okay, this is what I'm good at, this is the market, here are the opportunities, I trust my mind that this is actually true and correct. Now, how do I go about doing this thing that I think is the best opportunity for me? And then that's where you might want to find a mentor. You might want to look online, but now you know specifically what you want to target on. And that's pretty much what I think is the best way to get out of the rut, get out of the state of fear, irrational fear, and exaggerated emotional anxiety, and help you sort of think in terms of, you know, moving past that anxiety. What are your thoughts on that, Ronnie?
I loved everything that you said. I think it's absolutely true. However, the power of anxiety that anxiety can have over us, I think that there has to be some other ways that are not analytical. Now, ultimately, we have to be analytical to get rid of anxiety, just like you said.
Right.
But I have had debilitating moments in owning business. I've had debilitating moments in just life in general, where anxiety can be overwhelming, where it can keep you from getting out of bed on time. It can keep you from applying yourself. It can keep you from feeling like you're going to be able to breathe your next breath.
Yeah.
At one point in my life, while I was starting this company, years and years and years and years ago, I was at Cedars-Sinai in Los Angeles, California, convincing a doctor that I was having a heart attack and had to wear a heart monitor for 2 months, just to be told that, nope, this is still anxiety. I actually went to a doctor. It's so funny. My heart was beating so fast. I was having a panic attack, and the doctor, I was like, they were like, yep, your heart's beating really fast. So it starts beating faster. And he's like, calm down. And I said, I'm having a heart attack. And he said, no, if you were having a heart attack, you wouldn't be able to tell me you were having a heart attack. Like, you'd be in so much pain. And that's when I started to get over anxiety. And I'll tell you, I came up with some things, and I found the perfect way to deal with anxiety so I could get myself into that analytical mode that you were talking about.
Right. To snap yourself out of it, right?
Snap myself out of it. And I still have to do these things to this day.
Yeah.
So I have a playlist on YouTube that's on my personal YouTube, on my Spotify, on my Alexa, she's going to talk, but on my on all my music devices, I have a playlist. On YouTube, it's actually a video playlist of things that make me happy. And one of them is Kristen Chenoweth, If You Hadn't. It's one of the most funny videos of a Broadway play. And I wouldn't listen to this on the regular. It's just funny things. I have funny comedy mixed in with it. I have a funny get me out of my mind playlist, and I sometimes start my day with funny videos instead of looking at social media and TikToks and looking through all the various things, I'll go to my playlist. So as you're watching these things, start saving them for your future, save them to your own playlist, and go to those playlists and watch those things that bring you out of a funk. I have 2 dogs. I used to have one. A lot of people know Mr. Chappie, who passed away. He was there for 17 and a half years. But now I have Layla and Porter. They've been in my life for 2 years. So I really technically have 3 dogs, but one of them is just on the Rayburn Bridge watching over us. I encourage you to play with your animals. That is what they're there for. A lot of times small business owners neglect animals, and that's the unfortunate thing, is that they will always love us no matter how much attention we give them. So I have actually, while I'm working from home nowadays, I actually start my day with my dogs. My breaks also are breaks for my dogs. So we go out and do our walk in the morning, and Layla, it's like she's wearing a little watch, but 11 o'clock, they get a treat, and I go into the kitchen and have a snack. Then 1 o'clock, their PP break, and we go out and walk, and I walk on a path that I want to walk on. And then we have our, 2 p.m., 3 p.m. Time. Then they eat at 4 o'clock. And by the way, they have 3 small meals a day. And then we go outside in the evening. Right now in Arizona, it's a little bit hot, so I spend a lot of time throwing the ball for them so that they get their exercise. But one of the things I found the most to be able to shake off anxiety, and I hope everybody made it to this point, because I feel like I found the cure, and a lot of people who have anxiety don't understand this. So when I feel panic coming on, or I'm having a bad day, I do things that I did when I was a teenager. Before I understood the pressures of life, before I understood mortality, before I thought I could die, before I needed money, before you even had to have money. You remember being 13, 16, you didn't need money to have fun. You didn't need.
We're going to die one day?
Yeah. Before you started thinking those things. So I own a Nintendo. I don't like to play Nintendo, but I did when I was a teenager, so I own one. I own the Nintendo Switch, where you can download games, and the only games I ever play are Mario games and Donkey Kong. So anything that's 2D, you don't have to get complicated. I started bike riding. I remember when I was a kid, I wanted to be a BMX, jump ditch person, ramps and all that stuff, and I used to build them and do it. I would probably break my back if I tried to do something like that now, but riding a bike, just feeling that wind on your face. We have a great canal here in Arizona. You can ride a bike up and down it when it's not too hot. If you live near a park, I will tell you, everybody in the world has been on a swing set, and you can go to a park and just sit in a swing and swing as high as you can. It's not going to hurt you. Another thing that we all did, especially our age, if you're younger and have anxiety, you might not understand this, but I used to go to the mall and the movies as a teenager. And I have found that not watching a movie on Netflix, right, but actually going to the movie theater, buying the popcorn, buying the candy, have broke me out of those funks and panic attacks. Sometimes there's not a movie to watch, but going to the mall, we all went to Claire's and looked at stupid jewelry. I mean, it's different now, but we all went and bought hacky sacks and did those things. I still go into those funky stores. And one of my favorite things to do is go get lost in a dollar store, because you can spend all you want in a dollar store and buy, candles and crap and things that you don't really need, but you might use one day.
I just went to go see Barbie at the movie theaters. It was a blast. By the way, it's a good movie.
Yeah. A couple of more things. Coloring in a coloring book.
Yeah.
They make adult coloring books as well, where it's things that you can hang on your wall and frame and all these things later. Another thing is, call up an old friend. If you find yourself, you don't need to tell them you're having a panic attack, especially if you haven't talked to them in a while. Yeah. But calling an old friend and just catching up and saying, hey, I haven't talked to you in forever, and I just want to see how you're doing. You can wind up being on the phone for an hour and a half, 2 hours sometimes. And the biggest thing is identifying why you're actually panicky or having anxiety, and what you're really stressing about. You need to speak those words out loud. And I have found, once I actually identify what it is I'm dealing with, because sometimes as a business owner, there's so many things that you don't really understand why you feel the way you feel. Right. When you start naming things, and the way I do it is I say, I've got too many calendar appointments this week. I've got, to do this, I need to find a way to balance this. I'm trying to save for a vacation. I start naming the things. And for some reason, you will always know the moment you hit the answer. It will be like a ton of weight lifted off. And then when you find that answer, you can address it. That's when you can start getting to the analytical side, because until you identify it or until you bring down the anxiety, it's going to be hard to get to that analytical point that you talk about, which is very much a part of taking that big step forward. Sometimes though, you have to take that little step and identify the problem. And sometimes the best way to identify a problem is pull out a coloring book or go get on a swing set or ride a bike.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's called introspection, right? And so the process of introspection, which is what you just described, and I studied this extensively, which has been very helpful, is the first thing to do is identify what emotion you're feeling. So is it anger? Is it stress? Is it fear? Is it sadness? Then you have to ask yourself, okay, what triggered that emotion? What specific event caused me to feel that feeling, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then once you've identified, okay, this is what caused it. Let's just say you didn't get any end of the month and you realize, and you look at your statements, you've only made half of what you normally make. And you start feeling this fear or this anxiety. That's the trigger. Then you have to ask yourself, okay, what idea or belief is behind that event that's making me feel this emotion? And then the fourth question is to validate it. Is that feeling or idea true or not? So let's just say you don't hit the month that you typically hit and you start to panic, you have anxiety. Then you ask yourself, what is the idea or belief that I have in my head related to this trigger? Oftentimes, if you're honest with yourself, and the introspection is to look into your consciousness to find the answer, in this situation, it would be something like, well, it means that the notary business is dead. I'm never going to have work again. Then you ask yourself, is that true? I mean, is that valid? Is that a correct belief or idea? Once you realize it isn't, which it isn't, notaries have been around for over 2,000 years. We're probably going to stick around for a little longer. Then you start to realize, oh, it's the idea or belief that popped into my head based on that trigger that's incorrect, which is causing this emotion. Now you can reprogram your head, start fixing that idea or belief that you're holding, and that will help. And so this is what you're talking about. So it initially shocking yourself, you have your pets and you do your bike. I do a little harmonica and that gets me out of my funk. And then you start analyzing. So yeah, good stuff. And you wrote about this on your blog, right? Is that I remember reading that.
I did, and I'll be embedding this particular episode into that blog as well. And I'll link it into our YouTube play, and I think you have it to put on your website as well. The one thing that I wanted to add to that really quickly is, as you were talking, it jogged my memory, and I just want to see if I can get these words out properly. Sometimes the way we feel as adults can also be brought upon us by something that happened in our past.
Usually.
And, without getting too deep, because I am not a therapist, a psychotherapist, a counselor, or any of those things. I just have lived a life and had to deal with these things myself. Sure. I love my parents, but, my father sometimes tried to make me feel dumb as a kid because he thought that would make me better as a person. And, he's since apologized because we didn't have these understanding of how this affects people. However, throughout my life, there have been moments where things that were said kind of resonated as I got as an adult. I've had to overcome a lot to just own a business. And I start seeing sometimes notaries that bring their past with them. Yeah. Whether it be that you had a boss that made you feel bad about yourself, even though you might have been there for a long time, or when you were younger, you were fired from a job because you didn't do the right thing, but you're different now. You're, the further you have away, and even if it was your last job, you're in a whole new place now, and you can't bring something that happened from the past into the future. I mean, you can, but you shouldn't let it. And I said this on another call with our general mentorship weekly, and I think this is the last thing I'd like to say is anxiety is not on your payroll. You should not write a check to it. You're not going to write a check to it. So it really has no place in your business. You as a business owner really have to take the authority to identify what anxiety is and say, get the hell out of my office.
Right.
And that should be, if you want to have anxiety over relationships, great. But your business, you should be able to say, nope, you don't get to work here. You don't have a place here. There's no desk for you here. Talk to anxiety like it's a person and say, get the hell out of my office.
Yeah. And I think sometimes that works. And sometimes it's such a overpowering emotion that, and I want to say this, and I should have said this at the beginning, this isn't medical advice. We're not giving you guys advice on how to treat this kind of stuff. This stuff is serious, right? And I think in most cases, what we just talked about and what Ronnie just said will hopefully help. If it doesn't, though, definitely seek professional help. Go talk to a therapist, a counselor or something.
Or a business coach.
Someone that can actually help you sort of see what you can't see because you're a little too close to the picture. But at least for now, I hope you guys enjoyed the content that we gave. And now I know, Ronnie, you have every half a year, biannually, you have an event coming up. I know you have an event coming up. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it's actually a biannual event now. Every 6 months, I do an SEO seminar.
Okay.
So if you are a business owner and you own your own website, it is a paid seminar. I actually upped the prices this year, and they're probably going to go up next year. Recently, I was inducted as a Wix expert. So I'm actually the highest level Wix expert that you can possibly be at Wix. I don't work for Wix, but anyone that's building their website through Wix can actually contract me, and I can invoice directly through Wix for helping them. But I also sell things on my own, and you guys know I have a marketing course. For anybody that's not in my marketing course, let's say you own your website, you know a lot about marketing, but you don't understand how the internet works. On August 12th, and registration will be closed at August 11th. You just go to notarystars.com. It'll be right at the top. But I will be teaching you everything that I know in a 4 to 5 hour seminar about search engine optimization. I will be going over every component. You won't believe how easy it is. So if you own your own website, if you're working on WordPress, Wix, GoDaddy, I will be taking you through the components that you should be able to do on your website. No web design skills needed. And you will know when the next person calls and says, let us do your SEO for $350 a month, you can laugh at them and hang up because they'll never do what I will show you that you can do. And I can put my money where my mouth is. I can actually show you several pages that come up on page 1 of Google, sometimes beating Google My Business, meaning that the website's so powerful it comes up before Google My Business, which is really hard to see. But I can teach you how to do that. And if you're interested in learning, the registration is on notarystars.com, just right at the very top of the page.
Excellent. All right. So if you guys are interested, if you think that's something that might benefit you, that might help you go in the direction that you've identified as the direction you want to go in because it makes most sense to you, then go to notarystars.com and check that out. And Ronnie's a good friend of mine, and I've worked with him for many years. And so, he's definitely helped me out personally. So Ronnie, thank you for being on the show. And I also want to say that, more than ever, I'm really interested in hearing from you guys. You guys get to hear from me and from Ronnie and the other guests that I typically bring on this show, but I'd like to hear from you guys. I really am interested in knowing what kind of things you guys are struggling with, what kind of things you're needing help with. I think I'm looking to hopefully do more shows more frequently. And I think that kind of information would definitely help me with creating content that's valuable for you guys. So if you guys have any ideas, anything you're struggling with, reach out to me. My email is contact@notarybusinesstalk.com. Until then, I hope you guys enjoy the show. And until next time, be well, take care, and stay productive. Thanks a lot, guys. Take care now.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Notary Business Talk. To learn more about becoming a notary entrepreneur or to find out how Abraham can help you achieve your business goals, visit notarybusinesstalk.com.